Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Dr. Kyra Kendrick, Director of Membership Engagement at Women Leaders in Sports. My leadership philosophy is rooted in purpose, connection, and intentionality. I believe that we were all placed on this earth for a specific purpose, and part of being a good leader means figuring out what that purpose is and then executing it in a way that is beneficial to others. Another part of my philosophy of being a great leader is through connection. I don't think that we can walk through this world alone, and the importance of having connection and community are something that not only shouldn't be taken for granted, but are also something that other leaders need in order to be successful. The last part of my philosophy is intentionality. It's great that we have purpose and we have connection, but we must be intentional. We must show up to certain spaces as ourselves, and we must make sure that we are being intentional in our conversations and in our actions before, during, and after we leave a space. The Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute helped me hone these skills. I love my cohort and the 3 years that we spent together, and all it did was teach me that showing up authentically and being vulnerable can only help you be successful as a leader. I hope that you enjoy the episode.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Laura Barnard. Laura is the founder of Breakthru Brands. Greetings, Laura. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ty. Great to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Glad you're here. Now, Breakthru Brands, it's, from what I understand, a leadership development solution for empowering leaders. And one way you do that is building personal leadership brands that elevate the unique contributions and voices of diverse leaders. The company, I understand, is you're the founder, right? So
Yep.
It's women and LGBTQ owned and led. You've been doing it for 4 years, and over that 4 years, you have served over 200 clients with a team of 6 people. So you have a wealth of experience here. Prior to, you worked for 20 years in marketing and branding in corporate, well, specifically food and beverage space. So marketing and branding seems to be the thing, right, in terms of what has led to the credibility and experience to starting this brand. Tell me what led you to start Breakthru Brands.
Well, if I go back to, there was a moment. So I was sitting in one of those corporate roles that you described that I'd been in for quite some time, and I was as a basketball player, and you can relate to this, watching the Final Four in a small window on my computer screen. And it was in 2019 for the women's Final Four for basketball. It was watching Muffet McGraw during her press conference as she was about to begin those last set of games. And there was a moment in her press conference where she talked about the need for more visible women leaders. And I just kept watching this thing over and over again when I was supposed to be doing my day job. And a light bulb really went off for me about this idea to apply my skill set in branding and marketing to help, very specifically help this cause, to increase the visibility and really elevate more women leaders. At the time, we were living out on the East Coast. I picked up the phone and I called my mentor, someone who was a visible female leader in my life, and that was my Harvard basketball coach, Kathy Delaney Smith. And I asked her an outlandish question, if I could help her build her brand. And she laughed at me and said, "What are you talking about? I'm a basketball coach, and great idea, Laura, but maybe I'm not the fit." And I said, "No, just hear me out." And so this idea to reach out to individuals out there who are making a difference in people's lives and try to build their brands, not to sell more stuff, right, but to increase awareness and increase their impact and help them share their stories with those who need to hear it. And so Kathy was that reluctant first guinea pig client, and we've now been happy to say that we've worked with over 200 leaders in sports, in business, in the nonprofit space, really about increasing their visibility, but helping them share their story and increase their impact on others.
I find that interesting to start with your former coach, right? I can't imagine
Yeah,
calling Nick Saban or calling Bobby Williams, one of my coaches. Like,
let's do it. Let's try it.
uh, tell me about the process, right? Is
Yeah,
there an assessment process on where someone is in terms of their brand or how they present themselves, and then you work
yeah,
on based on that assessment, or what is the process of helping someone with elevating their brand?
yeah. So we've over the years kind of honed and refined a proprietary process that we work through called a brand unlock.
Okay.
And the brand unlock, if you can kind of picture in your mind's eye three big phases. First big phase is all about discovery. The second phase is all about putting together strategy. And the third phase is all about putting it into practice or activating the strategy. So discovery consists of us as a team getting to know the client really, really well. And we do that through two things. We do it through a super deep dive interview, discovery interview, we call it, with the client to get them to share their story, share their goals, share their aspirations, talk about what they think makes them special, unique, strengths, talents, those types of things, sort of self-awareness, right? We talked to four of their identified key stakeholders or their champions in their life, and this is not necessarily the typical corporate 360 review, right? But we want to talk to best friends, mentors, significant others, siblings, people who have kind of have grown with these people, see them at their best, and also can sort of vision cast for them. So we get to know the client through those folks, which is super helpful. And then we do, from our expertise side of things, a digital audit of the person's brand, of
Hmm.
their digital presence to say, okay, where are you showing up? Where is your brand? And we don't know you yet, but we're getting to know you. And what do we see in the marketplace, in your competitive set, if you will, of who's out there sharing ideas and what are you doing and how do we understand you? And so that discovery leads us into that's a second phase, right, where we can start to strategize based on what we've heard, the insights we've gathered from that discovery. What do we see as possibilities of paths forward for your brands? And it's got to be guided by something that is related to your purpose, mission, vision, right? This impact that you're seeking. So there's many ways, many pathways towards that. We work with the client to strategize and pick the pathway that feels best, that feels most impactful. And then with that strategy, we say, all right, now where does the rubber meet the road? How do we activate this? We need to help you tell your story, your unique story. What makes you special, not you great, not a laundry list of your accomplishments and accolades in your resume that you know is long and great, but no one cares about, right? It's about an emotional component, about what you've done, but more importantly, where you're heading and what is that change that you're trying to drive towards in the work that you're doing. And we work with the range of folks that work in a lot of different spaces, but really honing that story for them, owning those main messaging pillars that they can lean into when they're interviewed or presenting or on a podcast, right? What are those topic areas? And then we leave them with this really powerful tool that we are developing that's called their leadership brand archetype, or something that we call a leader type. So you may be familiar with different personality quizzes or enneagrams or archetype wheels, right? We've designed ours to really hone into what motivates the leader and how they best motivate others, and how they filter what they say and what they do for maximum impact, kind of relative to that archetype or that leader type. And we leave them with that coaching around, okay, you are the hero leader type, or you are the connector leader type, or you are the trailblazer leader type. Here's some tools, some strategies, some tactics, some ways you can best connect with others. And we set them up with this brand unlock full strategy to go do the thing, right? To go launch the business, or go for that next level promotion, or write that book, or go do whatever it is that is kind of on their path. But we really set the table with them through those three phases through that brand unlock
And
process.
which is interesting. So discovery, create a strategy, execute the strategy.
Yep.
I think that's
Yep.
excellent. And
Yep.
I imagine people who come into the business are at different levels of experience. And so,
Mm-hmm.
in discovery for someone who is unsure of what their future holds, is it like pulling teeth sometime, or like you know what I mean? How do you?
Oh, well, I'm not a dentist, but I can only imagine. Well, I have three kids. I've had some teeth pulled. It's very
Right.
painful. Hopefully it's not this painful, but there are barriers, sometimes. And through the years now, we've sort of bubbled up these different personas of folks who we're working with. And, um, on kind of one end of the spectrum is the emerging leader, kind of stepping up into a leadership role or kind of going for that next level, maybe in a corporate setting, might be, new director or new senior manager, right? And at the other end of the spectrum, you have a very established leader who may be more of a thought leader, right? And interestingly, like the barriers of, kind of getting that out of them, it really depends on the person, but we have some really powerful questions that we use in that discovery to sort of break down whatever it is that is the barrier that might be holding them back. And for some folks, it might be, uh, internal barriers like the imposter syndrome or negative self-talk or self-doubt or internalized biases, right? And for other leaders, it might be, they're too humble or they don't think they have a story or no, in the case of, Kathy Delaney Smith from Harvard, it was, definitely one of those too humble situations. No one wants to hear what a basketball coach has to say about leadership. And I said, no, people, you're exactly the person that can help people understand about leadership. So there's a range of these barriers, but we try to identify, okay, what persona is this that we're working with, and from the patterns of past work, how do we get through those barriers quickly, but then getting them able to start to step into their brand and tell their story confidently and clearly and kind of pass through that break through that barrier, if you will.
Thinking about getting clients,
Yeah.
is there so someone who may be in a position that they have worked towards, and now they're in this position and they're excelling at a high level, does that if they haven't been a previous client but then they're introduced to your services, does that person look for services to continue to elevate and excel their brand, or does that person not look for services? I guess right, in terms of someone who is where they want to be type thing. Like, what have you found? Because 200
Yeah.
people is a big
Yeah.
study group, right?
Yes, it is yes, we're thinking already, you're thinking ahead of us, so where we're going to go looking at this data and what we can learn from it, because it is a sizable base now. But I think, there's always more that we can do, especially, as leaders for others, for other people, and relative to the change that we want to see in the world. And we think about, we talk about, in some workshops that we do and some speaking opportunities, we'll talk about this concept of the limitless mindset, right? And we all know a lot about the fixed versus growth mindset, right? That's the great psychology professor Carol Dweck out at Stanford, wrote amazing books that on this topic. But what if there's something more than just a growth mindset? What if we could really truly remove the limitations that we are facing as leaders, as organizations, as communities, as societies? What would you do, right? If you weren't afraid, if there weren't a limit of time, budget, sexism, racism, homophobia, whatever that thing is that's the headwind for you, and there's a ton of headwinds for a lot of people, what would you do? What is possible? And even if the person's in that dream job, and we work with a lot of these folks, they're in their quote unquote dream job, but they're not fulfilled
Right.
and they're not fully, self actualizing, and they're not really connecting the dots of their work towards the impact that they want to see in the world. And they may be a premier, I'm making this up, an attorney partner at this prestigious law firm, but they're not working on a cause that's really matters to them or related to a change they want to see in the world. And there's a gap there. And so we try to, in a lot of cases, help them navigate that gap and say, okay, how can you use this amazing skill set, this amazing network you have, these credentials, this power and influence that you have, and apply it towards something bigger. And, in some cases, you know, we never are telling people to quit their day job, but we want to make sure there's other ways, other pillars of their brand, if you will, that can hit on the things that matter. So maybe it looks like joining a board or speaking, public speaking on the topic, or writing articles and kind of putting ideas out there towards the thing that they want to change, really with 2 feet still in their job, but branching out in different ways. So this idea of expanding their brand platform, maybe beyond their quote unquote dream job, to have more of that impact that they're seeking and that the world needs
Right.
with someone like with that level of skill.
Yeah, right. And so it's leaning into them more, right? Here, this is your dream
Exactly.
job. There are definitely gaps in
Yeah.
terms of feeling fulfilled, but let's figure out how we can lean into you more. What I find interesting, I do some leadership communications coaching, and what
Yeah.
I find interesting is when you do this type of work with people, it tends to veer into executive coaching, right? Now you're helping them strategize
Totally.
on things, and um, so that aspect. Tell me about that aspect when it actually, the needle starts getting into executive coaching. Now you're, coaching someone on making decisions in their job or something like that. Tell me about how
Yeah.
there's an aspect of feeling comfortable to advise someone to
Mm.
make those types of decisions, right? Where it's like, I haven't been
Mm-hmm.
in that seat before, and most of the work I've done is branding, or for me, most of the work I've done is like leadership education. But now,
Mm-hmm.
they're asking you questions about the big decision they have to come and how to approach the decision and strategy and all these types of things. So tell me about the
Yeah.
approach to that and how you and the 6 people that work with you have,
Yeah.
you know, gained the confidence to be able to advise someone on those types of like
Yeah.
strategic decisions.
Yeah. Great question. So my short answer, and this is I say this a lot, we are not executive coaches.
Right.
If
Right.
you need it, I have a great roster of wonderful executive coaches we refer people to, but that really is an important thing to distinguish for folks. And of course, if someone has the specific question I'm going to need after the project work, we will help them out, right? Obviously,
Exactly.
and coach and advise the best we can. But the difference for me is really around, more performative or performance related to the job versus more transformational. And I think what we're trying to do through the brand unlock is really a more transformational, very leader centric process. It's not job centric or performance
Individual.
centric
Yes, for the individual.
right. It's about them as a leader. And I think this idea of advising them, right? We are strategists more than advice. So we're not. I will say we're not executive. You gotta know who we are, who we're
Right.
not. We're
Yeah.
not executive coaches. We play an advising role, but we're really strategists. And this is where the beauty and the power of a really good strategy is that it's a decision-making mechanism for the person. So if we build the brand strategy, the leadership brand strategy for this person, in terms of objectives, goals, how to begin to do this, what is on brand, what is off brand. That strategy serves as an awesome decision making filter for them of what to say yes and no to. So our role really is to sort of paint the picture, kind of lay out the menu, create the choices for someone, lay out the strategy, pressure test with them, and then that person has to make the choices. We're not saying, I have three, there's three job rotations that I can consider, A, B, and C. What, Laura, team, what do you think I should do? We're not going to tell them choose job A over B or over
Right.
C, right? We're saying, okay, based on your brand, your strategy, your intended impact, this document we've created together, that is going to help guide your decision making. So, we are creating the choices for the client, and then we're creating the strategy that's going to help them make the
Make
decisions.
decisions.
And
Yep.
it's more transformational than performative, performance related, and it's really about again getting them towards as fast and efficiently as possible on that path towards the greatest impact that they can have, versus just more pay or the promotion level up. We want to help them sort of step into that, and realize that.
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
Cool. Thank you. Well, I hope I mean, we're proud of the work. And I think, it's hard to be different because people try to put you in a box of like, okay, are you this or are you
Hmm.
that? And we're kind of a little bit difficult to understand at times, but people that get it, and organizations now that are getting it, it's kind of a critical puzzle piece that might be missing in the traditional leadership development,
Hmm.
professional development space, for sure at the organizational level. I think, as a executive at a large, food company, Mars Wrigley, right? Amazing professional development, no shortage of executive coaches, trainings, all these things, but no one was ever really talking to me specifically at my core about who I am as a leader,
Right.
how I tell my story, what is the impact that I'm seeking. It was always about the next level up and work on these skills and these capabilities and take this job rotation, check this box. And it was very boxed in, and that, which is great because I developed a lot in that culture. But beyond that, what else is out there? And that's where we try to kind of take a look at what else is out
Yeah,
there.
which is important. 200 clients, you mentioned at some point in the near future,
Yep.
you will be diving into the data based on those clients because it's a good subset, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I have a question, even though you haven't
Yeah.
dived into the data yet.
Sure.
200 people. I wonder if there are common challenges that you see more often than not amongst people who come in on the roster I see in terms of clients on your website, a lot of them are women. I wonder if
Hmm.
there are common challenges you see in terms of whether it be insecurities or confidence or community. What are the common challenges you see in terms of helping people elevate their
Yeah.
brand and understand who they are as leaders?
Yeah. So in the analysis that we have done, which has been really revealing, and just kind of always looking for patterns, right? Like what are some patterns of needs, how we're providing solutions, this transformative solution, right? What's working, where are we getting good feedback? And I think there's two areas of uh, common barriers, I'll call them, to your question. And this, we have had a lens on women, pretty, intentionally for as we started the company, and now the lens is now adding into the underrepresented leaders, right, which is beyond just women identifying leaders, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're intentionally expanding because that's where our clients are starting to come from. So the two gaps are, one is confidence, and the second is authority. And
Okay.
so the confidence gap, and this is one that hits women, statistically speaking, harder than men. And we have all the studies on our website explaining this. If you're going to geek out, and as I might be, interested in learning more, but women leaders are less likely to feel confident in their job performance in their careers, and it's definitely a big gap to men. And the authority gap, this is an interesting one that we kind of got educated on, and we're like, this is it. And it's particularly, again, in simplistic version of male versus female, right? Senior female leaders are less likely to feel heard and trusted in the workplace, and they tend to overreport feelings of experiencing interruption and doubt. And this is, look at if you can close the confidence gap and the authority gap, then you can start to hopefully move the needle on actually closing the gap in representation, right? That actual, uh, the 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs being women, right, as the most glaring gap, or the pay gap, those gaps that exist sort of as an outcome. So we look at, we're not a policy making organization. We're not, trying to uh, re-engineer entire industries, right, to be more inclusive, right? We're working on things, but the thing that we can solve, or we're trying to solve really hard in our process, is closing those confidence and authority gaps, because that's what we saw as a common pattern for a lot of these women. And really, if we expand it now to underrepresented leaders, so non-straight white male identifying leaders, these confidence and authority gaps, we are kind of honing in on those.
Tell me again to make sure I fully
Yeah.
understand when you say authority.
Yeah.
Explain that one more time for me, please.
Yeah, so it's a feeling. So if you feel that you have authority, so it's an emotional thing. It's a qualitative thing.
Okay.
It's about feeling heard and feeling trusted. And so this was like the McKinsey and Company did this awesome huge study of over 30,000 companies globally. Um, I'll send you the link, Ty, back in 2022. And we referenced this body of work a lot, this body of
Uh-huh.
research, but it's really about the senior female leaders reporting at a 20% greater point basis than men, that they feel less likely to feel heard and trusted, and that they experience interruption and doubt. And I will tell you, as a senior female leader sitting at a board table, when I was head of marketing for a large confections brand,
Hmm.
um, that was day in and day out. I'm fully competent. I'm skilled. I'm educated. I'm privileged. I'm a white woman, right? I'm sitting at this table, and I'm feeling like I'm not heard and I'm not trusted, and I'm feeling, constantly interrupted. And that is a pervasive thing that especially women are facing. And so I feel like, therefore, the output is I have no authority. So what do I do? Do I give up, or do I, for me, I moved on. I left, right? I opted out because I was tired of experiencing that.
So, so it's interesting to me as I listen to the two things,
Yeah.
confidence and authority. Confidence is an internal feeling
Mm,
that people deal with whether they have credentials or not, right?
mm,
And
yeah.
feeling like you have authority based on how you described it sounds like it is an external thing
Mm-hmm.
based on how you are treated. So I wonder, well, how you are treated, how you are viewed, how you are respected within the organization.
Mm,
So I, it seems like if you can coach someone up to say and present themselves based on what they've done to understand themselves better, to know why they should have confidence in who they are.
mm,
But in a setting where their authority is either questioned or not respected, how
mm.
can you coach that if it's all external based on the other people at the table?
Yeah. I mean, you have to go through a brand unlock, I guess is the short answer. No, well, so you're hitting on something very important, Ty, is like this idea of internal and external, and confidence tends to be a more internal barrier. And then we think about authority is like when we put it out there externally, how are we being perceived? And
Right.
what is the stimulus that we're receiving back? Is it making us feel good or good or not, right? Am I feeling good or bad or hurt or trusted? So where you're kind of cueing in, this is the psychology major in me, right? But there's a lot of internal barriers, right? And then there's this external thing of how we're perceived. So the work through building the brand, a brand is all about perception, right? A brand is you need to, yes, be internally clear on who you are. But when we flip the switch to say, okay, here's, hey world, this is who I am, how you're perceived by others, that's your brand. The promise that you make to others, that's your brand. So we're trying to understand in you know in a company setting, okay, try to understand the organizational culture, the organizational context, and why is this person not being perceived as trustworthy? Why is this person not being perceived as having something important to say? And we try to, that's where we try to be real pinpointed in, okay, these are the messaging points that matter for you, this relative to the objectives that you have for yourself and for the organization. Um, Here's some feedback that we learned from one of your key stakeholders about um, you're not speaking up enough in meetings, for example. So we'll try to take the contextual feedback for the person of how they're actually being perceived and give them some recommendations on things to do either from a content, a messaging perspective, or from a communications perspective to try our best to close that authority gap. But it's like it is like we're always kind of balancing the internal, you as a leader at your core, self reflection, self awareness, but then okay, flip it out externally. Say what's happening outside. How are people taking you in, right? It's like how are you showing up
Yeah.
to people?
Yeah. You do.
Here's
You
some
do.
observations we have, but that's the hard one.
You work on what you can work on to take away the excuses. Is how I say it. When you talk
Yeah,
about
love that.
the hiring black head football coaches in the NFL or something like
Yeah,
that, right? It's
right,
like, okay,
right,
we'll do what we can to get everyone trained up so that any excuse you have, we're taking all that away. So now it's
right.
just in your case, right? It's just
Yep,
the people at the table are just biased. They just, you can't coach them any different, right?
yeah,
They're gonna interrupt you. They're gonna, it's the
right,
organizational thing as opposed to an individual thing. So I find
exactly.
that very interesting. I ask a couple
Yeah,
questions here and then we'll wrap.
sure.
Um, Confidence and authority, how do you see that delineating when you talk about younger clients versus the veteran clients who have a little more experiences? Are those still the two main things you see, or does that differ as clients get older? Does
Yeah.
it make sense?
Yeah, no, it's good. So I think I'm the new, I'll say the young generation, because I'm in my, early 40s now, so I can now say this, the young generation, the
Me
new
too, right?
generation in the workforce. Um, I see a positive indicator, I'll call it, that they are in my, again, the 200 plus database of clients served that we have. um, I feel that the younger generations that are rising up in the workforce have more confidence in
Okay.
themselves. They're a little bit more self-assured. Whether why that is, whether we call it, they've, generationally speaking and culturally speaking, and like what are they what are they a byproduct of? Is it, parents that were actually paying attention to them and coddling them or whatever it might be?
Right.
I feel like there's a good indicator that the new emerging leaders are pretty confident. And I think there's a blind spot though when in that authority space where like, hey, you're confident, you're sure of yourself, you are independent, you feel that the world is full of possibilities. You want to make the world a better place. There's a lot of optimism and pretty high confidence. Where there's a bit of a drop off is still in that authority space. And we say, yeah, you may feel super confident, but you're not being perceived yet as an authority in your place of work, and that's where we try to really hone into, okay, it's not just who you are, but how you show up, what you say, how you say what you say, and that gets into some of the communication, coaching that we would do as part of the project. But it's really equipping them to be in the workforce with folks who are not like them, who are of the older generations, let's call it, where there's that gap that exists. So I think the younger leaders have maybe a leg up on confidence, still gapped on authority. The established leaders or those thought leaders, it always surprises me when the person who you think really has it all together, should be the most confident person,
Mm-hmm.
is not. And that's where that imposter syndrome,
Right.
rears its ugly head. And it is amazing to me. And I'm not going to throw names out there, but people that you would never imagine having this, are impacted by it. And that's where, helping really remind them through those key stakeholder interviews, so through those champions in their life, hey, remember, you are this thing. And we try to just refresh that within them, and then give them that boost through this project work to reapply, refresh, almost redefine their brand, and kind of breathe some new energy into it, because they kind of they maybe stall out a little bit and feel like, okay, what got me here won't get me there, or I've climbed the first mountain, I don't know if I have it in me to climb the second mountain. And we said, no, you like, go back to Kathy, there is another mountain for you to climb after coaching at Harvard for 40 years. Um, Title IX is still an issue for girls and women in sports. Gender equity is still an issue. People still desperately need to hear diverse voices talking about leadership, right? So we've defined her second mountain, and she's writing a book on leadership. She's teaching classes at Harvard. She's working on nonprofit board work. She's on podcasts, right? She's putting herself out there, and that almost like shaking off that imposter syndrome and clarifying, okay, what is the next mountain? And that can be very powerful, because these people have so much influence and abilities, and we want to just kind of shake that off them and get them onto the next big thing that they can do.
Right. Yeah. I find that very interesting. This is the last question here.
Yeah.
It, you'll probably never have a shortage of potential clients, right?
I hope
Um,
not.
it's
Some days, I don't know, Ty. Some days, like, where are
yes.
the people?
Well, I guess, well, there's never shortage of potential clients, but then
No,
the
right.
shortage could come in people who are willing to pay for services, right?
Yeah, you got it. Exactly. You got it.
What do you see in terms of the future, right? You talked about this, these generations. Like I'm 40s too, right? So you talk about
Yeah.
the generations coming after us, and they have a different ilk, right? Come in a little more
Mm-hmm.
confidence. But
Yeah.
what do you see in terms of the future relative to people's leadership brand and elevating who they are as leaders? I don't know if the question makes sense to you,
Yeah.
but it's kind of thinking about the future. Where does your mind
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. I think a lot about the future. I try
Hmm.
to, as we're growing, and we have to pivot and reinvent and refresh our own brand as a company, and as leaders of the company. Where I'm very excited, and it's, selfishly how we're growing as a company, but where I see great growth, and also greater equity, is through companies who are really truly putting their money where their mouths are, and investing in underrepresented leaders, and in closing the representation gap that exists in leadership. So where we're placing our bet as a company, is finding those large companies, organizations with budgets, with very clear diversity, equity, inclusion goals with very clear representation and leadership goals, with a purpose-driven culture. And not all those companies, there's lots of companies out there, not all of them check all those boxes, right? But finding those companies that are like-minded in that way, who are willing and are investing in their underrepresented leaders to elevate them, to amplify them, to support them, to retain them, to drive the change that needs to happen within the teams, within the organization, within the industry, and help these folks be great role models as they are. So we're shifting, and I think hopefully the younger generations, at least folks I'm talking to and coaching and mentoring, I always advise them, find a company that aligns with your values, find a mission-driven, purpose-driven organization, and one that's going to support your personal growth and development. And that's, I wish someone had given me that advice 20 years ago when I went right out of college and go work for a giant bank that didn't, was just a cog in a massive wheel with really no connection to purpose. It took me 20 years to connect the dots, say, what can I do with this skill set and passion in a place that's in a culture that's mission and purpose driven, and trying to make the world in some capacity, make it more equitable for others. And that's really, I'm hopeful about that, again, for our own growth as a company, as we're looking to sell our leadership development solution and an empowerment solution into organizations. And I looking, again, at that young generation to say, okay, be discerning about where you're going to spend your time. It's not just getting a job, right? You want to find something that's going to be a fit for you, support you, and, hopefully be moving the needle on something that is making the world better.
Yeah, which is excellent, right? I think there's a lot of people who are learning to think that way. It's been in the academy, right? You think about Harvard Business Review, and people have talked about this type of thing for years now, maybe 20, 25, maybe even longer. But you see it coming to fruition, especially what you said when you talk about these younger generations coming in and actually want to work somewhere that means something to them because they watched their parents toil away at whatever for however many years. So
exactly.
Well, Laura, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much, Ty.
Yes, ma'am. That was Laura Barnard. She's the founder of Breakthru Brands. And of course, I am Ty Brown with one question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.